Wow, what an interesting and fascinating life I've had working with plants. The other day, something like 60 years, sounds amazing, sounds a long time. And have I seen a lot of changes in those times. I started off with my interest in plants by just growing plants, collecting some seeds, growing them, and established a pure native plant nursery near Millicent in the southeast. This led me to seed collection, and later on a lecturer at Tate College in Mount Gambier, where I started to get more involved. I worked in this area and did landscaping for people. I started some of the largest cut flower farms growing bankseas and proteas in the southeast. It helped a lot of people over many years. But later I was offered a job with Breeding Australia, where I had to learn more about the landscapes and the country. And I did a lot of re-veg work on Eyre Peninsula, Kangaroo Island, many parts of South Australia, even into Victoria, and attended lots of seminars and gave lectures in most states in Australia. Even was fortunate enough to be a consultant overseas on a tree project in Mongolia. So you can see my life has been really entrenched with native flora and all that goes with it, because without the plants, there's no birds to land on the branches, there's no insects, there's really not much at all. Plants are the basic raw material for most living organisms on this planet. So you can see how important it was. In my time, I've seen governments abuse the landscape, I've seen people abuse the landscapes, but I'm happy to say now governments are taking some interest. But of late, I hear of still land clearing going on, something like 5,000 hectares in New South Wales in 2018, which no doubt disappoints me no end. Clearance near Renmark in South Australia, 2018, disappoints me greatly. But out of all that, I've now retired, and in my retirement, I thought I would just write some books about there's so many people out there are seeking knowledge and love plants. So I wrote a small book, and somebody bought my first book, and I was really excited about that. And somebody said, you should do another one. Unfortunately, I did listen, good or bad. 18 books later, I'm still seem to be going. Thank you. One of my other interests and studies is working with Aboriginal communities. As you know, there are many in Australia, spread right across this vast nation. One that I'm fairly familiar with are the Adjamatna people in the Flinders Ranges of South Australia. I spent time there with the elders, learning about the plants that they've used over hundreds of years, whether it be for ceremony, whether it was for implements, whether it was for food, and quite detailed list of plants here that were used, fully illustrated, and somewhat a brief history of the Adjamatna people in the northern Flinders of South Australia. Knowing, growing and eating native foods is a very popular subject in Australia at the moment. This, again, fully illustrated book tells you about just not all the edible foods, but some of the more popular ones that are used these days. Things like muntaberry, things like quandong, bush raisin, native pepper, and many more. Again, fully illustrated with some little recipes in there. Bush desert lime, and many more. Also the lovely lemon myrtle that's popular, that you can have in drinks and use as condiments on your food plants. So that's been popular. We did quite a few of those. People liked them that much that they wanted me to run off some more, which we did, and once more. And again, we may have to do it again soon. So knowing, growing and eating edible wild foods in southern Australia is just another one of my series. One of the books that we have written is The Jewel of the Australian Desert. Of course, when we say jewel, we don't refer to some of the other types of jewels, but this is a wild fruit called a quandong. And there are many fruits in Australia used these days, but again, this is one of those fully illustrated books on this wonderful plant of ours with full colour photos, how to propagate them, the people who have used them over the years, and all other aspects of crondon. I believe this is the first book of its type in Australia, and also how to use them in cooking. We find that exciting. People like to obtain the fruit, then they're not too sure how to use them, and there are wonderful recipes in this book for. So if you're out there looking for a book of the Australian bush, always remember Jewel of the Australian Desert. The story of crondon is a really good book. Here's another book. This is about she-oats. We all have favourites. She-oats have been one of my favourites for many, many years. They belong to the casuarina family. And here, again, fully illustrated the different casuarina, the different parts of Australia, and also the people who use them in wood turning, in revegetation, and in many other ways. So, a very interesting book on one of our great Australian trees, that is the she-oats. Another one of my books, slightly smaller but in full colour, are the plants, the native plants of the Coorong. The Coorong is a special region of South Australia, and in here it tells you the plants that were used by the people before European settlement, how they used them. It's been popular over many years. We've had to reproduce it a few times, and it is one of my favourites. The first book is a book titled What Seed Is That? And this is a book about, did you know that all plants come from seeds to start with? And of course this book, beautifully illustrated by a friend of mine, Anne Miles, and it tells you about all the different plants in which regions, how to propagate them in South Australia and further afield. It's fully illustrated, which shows you seeds to size, grass seeds, and many other interesting points. It's been very popular over many years, and hopefully it will continue to, particularly as an educational book. What I find with a lot of people when they're interested in plants is to want to know what they are. This is always the difficult part. So this book, which is regional but covers a part of the Adelaide Hills and the whole southeast of the state, simply is just, again, a fully illustrated book from trees, divided into sections, trees and shrubs, and fully illustrated wonderful line drawings to size, and how you might go about identifying them. Often with TAFE colleges, we run workshops on plant identification, and people can learn a lot that way by understanding the botanics of plants. When they go out in the bush, they can start to learn what they are for those who are interested. So, what southeast plant is that? It's been around a while. It's very popular in schools and libraries. Okay, what's popular these days are what we call little identikit books, which are small. You can pop them in your pocket when you're hiking. And this one is plants of the Flinders Ranges. Now, not all the plants in here are called, just some of the more popular ones or common ones you may see when you're hiking. Again, illustrated, and we'll tell you a bit more about it. That's, a popular little book to pop in your pocket when you're hiking in the Flinders Ranges. Another one here is some useful plants. When we say useful plants, of the indigenous people before European settlement, was those that were used for various reasons. As I said earlier, it could be for ceremony, for food, for weaving, basket making, and so on. It's just a little black and white book. Also tells you about those with tubers, which was a food source, and so on. Just a little one. This one covers from the southeast through to the Coorong, right around Adelaide, where the Garda people lived. We've been talking about plants tonight, but also I'm very interested in local histories. This one is a little seaside township in the southeast of South Australia, near Mount Gambier. And of course I can't do a history without talking about the local plants. And these were the plants that were utilised by the Boondik people before European settlement. Again, it's a history of fishing, the first people who lived there, and lots of lovely old black and white photos of those people who came before. It's called the Rots, or Les Charpentiers.